Good morning, good morning, good morning. All right. See how everyone is doing. Trying to adjust some things here. All right. Everything looks good. Good morning and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I hope that everybody is having a great and wonderful day in the neighborhood. Yes, I've got on a printed tee today, and it says, "Do good, seek justice, and help the oppressed." And you can actually get this shirt at meganmatt.com. MEGHANMATT.com. She's got lots of other wonderful printed tees over there. All right, so I do apologize. I want to apologize for yesterday. I was not able to have both of my streams up. So yesterday's broadcast is not on YouTube, so it won't be archived. But that was a really good broadcast. So I hope that my YouTube live streamers, you can always go to my Periscope, which is pscp.tv/Life Nation to catch episode number 4. All right. So I am back on today, live streaming on YouTube and on Periscope. So today is Teachable Tuesday, and I want to welcome you all. I want to say good morning, Pastor Ben. Good morning, Lady Barbara. Good morning, those of you who will be on the broadcast and even catching the replay. Also, remember, if you are a part of the We Dare Squad and you have decided to join us in our monthly support, don't forget to take care of that for the month of February. Some of you have already given in advance, given your seed of support, and I do appreciate that. So thank you very, very, very much. And if you'd like to find out how to become a part of the We Dare Squad, feel free to email me at reachshante@gmail.com. That is reachshante@gmail.com. All right. So we are back on 2 topics, and this is a topic that we have been continuing in, and it is called the Black Bourgeoisie. Now, I was actually able to get my hands on a copy of the actual book. So we may come back to the Black Bourgeoisie because right now we are reading a section from this actual book, The Black Bourgeoisie by E. Franklin Frazier. And the subtopic here, as you can see, it says, "The book that brought the shock of self-revelation to middle-class blacks in America." So again, he was the one that was really giving definition to what it meant to be a part of the Black bourgeoisie. He was the one who was giving definition to the attitudes, the behaviors, the character traits, and the character failures of blacks in the middle class. And it's very interesting because as we have been reading, it's like we see some of these same things and same behaviors exhibited by the black middle class today. All right. So this is the actual work, Black Bourgeoisie, and we are reading from a collection of great documents in black history, which, as you can see, is a very old text. So we're going to continue to read concerning the Black Bourgeoisie, and this is actually the conclusion from the actual book. After we finish this today, we're going to go back into This Land is Our Land, and we're going to continue our discussion about immigration. Now, many of you saw in the news yesterday, it was going around that I believe Attorney General Jeff Sessions was speaking to, I believe, either a sheriff's association or a sheriff's union, and he said those dog whistle words that I told you all to be listening for, and people went nuts. They went nuts, and they were saying that, oh my gosh, he's out of the box. He's letting people know exactly what his agenda is by his words. And some people were saying, well, I don't think that's what he meant. But we've already told you that the word America and the word American in this country, according to the records, was originally only meant white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, particularly with a focus on the male. All right. So when your attorney general says that they believe that being a police officer, or that the career or the profession of law enforcement is a part of Anglo-Saxon heritage, and that we should keep it as Anglo-Saxon heritage, what he's saying is we should keep it as white as we possibly can. We should control that particular profession as a part of white heritage, and really as a part of white supremacy and white power. All right. So go back and check through your news feeds, or even type into the search bar for Facebook, Jeff Sessions talk, or Jeff Sessions Jeff Sessions Anglo-Saxon comment, and it'll pull up the video where he is talking, and he is dog whistling, okay, to those who are in law enforcement, that yes, we want to keep this profession as white as possible. All right. And anybody knows that if you live in a country where it's a diverse set of people, diverse ethnicity, diversity of faith, diversity of thought, that is unacceptable. Okay. It really is. For your attorney general, who's supposed to be representing law and order and justice for all, to say something like that in this climate should be a fireable offense. But because we know what this administration is pushing, we know it's probably not going to be a fireable offense, which is terrible and shameful for America and the history and legacy that this administration is leaving. All right. After we finish our Black bourgeoisie, we're going to pause and we're going to do some Black history flashcards, and then we're going to move into our piece on immigration. All right. Because believe it or not, as Black Americans, we need to understand immigration and the fact that we are not immigrants. Let's say that again. Black Americans who are descendants of slaves are not immigrants. We're not involuntary immigrants either. Yeah. We are a special class of people. That's why you had the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was about protecting a specific class of people that did not come here. All right. And some of us were not indigenous here. Some Black Americans are indigenous Americans, though. All right. That's a whole other history lesson. But for the ones who actually are descendants of slaves who came over on ships, they're not immigrants, and they're not involuntary immigrants, as some of these textbooks are now lying. Why am I saying that? Because what happens when you declare, or when you try to label someone an immigrant, then you can now start lumping them into a class of people who can potentially be deported. That's why language matters, and that's why I'm not going to let someone call me an involuntary immigrant. Black bourgeoisie. Let's go to E. Franklin Frazier's conclusion on the Black bourgeoisie. He says, when viewed in the broad perspective of the changes which are occurring in the Western world, this study of the Black bourgeoisie reveals in an accurate form many of the characteristics of modern bourgeoisie society, especially in the United States. Hence, it was difficult to resist the temptation to compare the Black bourgeoisie with the same class among white Americans. However, it was not the purpose of this study to isolate and analyze the common characteristics of this class in the modern world. Our task was less ambitious and therefore more restricted. Our purpose was to treat the Black bourgeoisie as a case study of a middle-class group which had emerged during the changing adjustment of a racial minority to modern industrial society. From this standpoint, our study may have a broader significance than the group which we have studied. It may have some relevance for the study of the emergence of a middle class in colonial societies, especially in African societies at present undergoing rapid changes. The characteristics of this class in the various societies will have to be studied in each case in relation to its history and the economic and social forces which are responsible for its development. The black bourgeoisie in the United States is an essentially American phenomenon. Its emergence and its rise to importance within the Negro community are closely tied up with economic and social changes in the American community. Its behavior as well as its mentality is a reflection of American modes of behavior and American values. What may appear as distortions of the American patterns of behavior and thought are due to the fact that the Negro lives on the margin of American society. So in other words, he's saying you live, if you're black middle class at this time, you live on the margins of American society. And at the same time, many of them were trying to imitate American society within their own margins. The very existence of a separate Negro community within its own institutions, within the heart of the American society, is indicative of its quasi-pathological character, especially since the persistence of this separate community has been due to racial discrimination and oppression. As the result of this fact, the black bourgeoisie is unique in a number of respects. Here are some ways that it is unique. First, it lacks a basis in the American economic system. Among colonial peoples and among other racial minorities, the bourgeoisie usually comes into existence as the result of its role to the economic organization of these societies. But the black bourgeoisie in the United States has subsisted off the crumbs of philanthropy, the salaries of public servants, and what could be squeezed from the meager earnings of Negro workers. Hence, Negro business, which has no significance in the American economy, has become a social myth embodying the aspirations of this class. Then, because of the position of the Negro in American life, it has been impossible for the black bourgeoisie to play the traditional role of this class among minorities. The attempt on the part of the Communist Party to assign to the black bourgeoisie the traditional role of this class in what the party defined as the struggle of the Negro people for national liberation only tended to emphasize the unreality of the position of the black bourgeoisie. So what is E. Franklin Frazier saying? He's saying at the time that hear the difference. He's not talking about the consumerism. He's talking about Negro business, Negro's ability to generate economy. He's not talking about consumption. On the consumption side, there was plenty of people buying stuff. Just like in our current society, we have I think it's up to $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion worth of spending power. Okay, we are major consumers of a product. So like when the gentleman went into Old Navy recently, okay, and he was profiled and he was searched and he was racially profiled and discriminated against, and that went viral. And you see how quickly Old Navy responded by firing those people who did that. Why? Because they understand the power of black consumerism. Somebody can hashtag that. Black consumerism. All right? But that's not what E. Franklin Frazier is talking about. He's talking about black business or Negro business. The ability to generate economy is what is lacking. It's lacking even today. Okay? I want to say about with the wealth that is controlled in this country, black businesses have not really moved in the last, I think they said 50 years or maybe more than that. black business and the accumulation of wealth from the overall, the percentage has not moved. I think we own 0.5%, half of 1% of the black wealth. So he's telling you that this whole notion of black business, okay, compared to what we are consuming is not equal. And he's telling you that the majority of the income that is coming from black America, let's go back to what he just said. He said the majority of the income is coming from those who get part of their income from philanthropy, meaning other people giving to their organization, and who get part of their income from being a public servant, or those who work for the government. And there was an article that came out recently that talked about the number of black Americans who work for the government, and the fact that as the government positions and offices are being slashed, the people who are going to hurt the most from those budget cuts will be black middle class Americans. All right. So what he's saying is still true today. He also says one last thing, and black business subsists off of what can be squeezed, that's the word he used, from the salaries or the earnings of black workers. All right. So when you talk about black business, as many of us have been talking about, entrepreneurs lately, it is this notion that if you only want black people to support black business, you have to think realistically about how many of them actually can. All right. It's a numbers game, and numbers don't lie. Okay. You have to think about how many black people are in business. And then you have to think about the number of black people overall in your population. Okay. Which is around, I think, between 40 to 42 million in the United States. And then you have to think about the number of black people overall in the country that are currently unemployed. So you have to factor that in. So when you say, when the black business owners say, well, black people aren't supporting me, you have to go back and look at the numbers of who's working. What is their income like? Okay. Many of them may be working, but they may be underemployed. So how much can they actually support your business? Which goes back into, you have to start thinking about, yes, I want black people to support my business, but I also need to be making products that are marketable, not just to my community, but to other communities. And then I also need to make sure that I'm producing products that are marketable internationally, so that if I want my brothers and sisters over in Africa, in the various countries in Africa, to also support my product, then I need to be thinking about systems and ways to get my product to a larger global market. All right. So that's just a note for the black business owners who oftentimes complain about people not supporting and buying their product. You have to look at the numbers. How many of us are there in this country? How many of us are working? And of the working, how many of us have that monies to spend on your product? Okay, so a little bit of business sense there I want to just plug in there. All right, let's keep reading. He says this. Moreover, the black bourgeoisie have shown no interest in the liberation of Negroes, except as it affected their own status or acceptance by the white community. This is E. Franklin Frazier telling you about the black bourgeoisie. And he's telling you that this particular group of people historically have not shown an interest in all black people being liberated, or in all black people being freed from restraints or from oppression. All right. And then he says, They viewed with scorn the Garvey movement with its nationalistic aims. They show practically no interest in the Negro Renaissance. They wanted to forget the Negro's past, and they have attempted to conform to the behavior and values of the white community in the most minute details. Therefore, they have often become, as has been observed, exaggerated Americans. So in his research, in his study of what was happening back then, he was saying that black people who were living at a certain level of income, right, had decided that liberation was something that they weren't really interested in, all right? And that really, because they were living on the fringes of American society, they actually became exaggerated Americans, or they actually became kind of a caricature of what they wanted to be as an American, but they were still locked out in many ways. Because of its struggle to gain acceptance by whites, the black bourgeoisie failed to play the role of a responsible elite in the Negro community. Many individuals among the first generation of educated Negroes who were the products of missionary education had a sense of responsibility towards the Negro masses and identified themselves with the struggles of the masses to overcome handicaps of ignorance and poverty. Their influence over the masses was limited, to be sure, not the control exercised by the white community. Nevertheless, they occupied a dignified position within the Negro community and were respected. As teachers of Negroes, good morning. As teachers of Negroes, they generally exhibited the same sincere interest in education and genuine culture as their missionary teachers. Therefore, they did not regard teaching merely as a source of income. On the other hand, today, many Negro teachers refuse identification with the Negro masses and look upon teaching primarily as a source only of income. In many cases, they have nothing but contempt for their Negro students. Moreover, they have no real interest in education and genuine culture and spend their leisure in frivolities and activities designed to win a place in Negro society. Now, when I was in college, this was a huge topic, I know, amongst black intellectuals. And that was this idea of should you be trying to win a place in American society, or should you be trying to build a place or carve out a place in American society? And I went to an HBCU for a semester. I eventually got my degree from Florida State University, and that's a whole other broadcast. Now it's almost impossible to get into Florida State with the new admissions requirements, which is a whole other topic. But during the time that I was at Florida State, I was going back and forth because at the time when I first entered, before I went into the major of teaching and education, I was still under the major of pre-architecture because I had decided that I was going to go to architecture school. And at this point in my journey for collegiate education, it was my time to decide whether or not I was going to declare my major as architecture or if I was going to declare my major as arts education. So I took a semester at Florida A&M University, and when I was over there, I noticed a couple of things about how their programs are run. And to this day, their programs are still pretty much run that way. They have a program called SBI, which is their School of Business. And the way that their School of Business is run, I said to myself, I wouldn't want to go to this school for business, because the way that the school is run, it is run to train you, as they said here, to win a place. All right. So I had taken some business classes at Florida State. All right. And then I was looking at the business model for the HBCU, and I noticed a very clear and distinct difference The business school at Florida State University was training people to go into business for themselves. They were training them to really take an entrepreneurial track. Okay? Now, I know HBCU people, don't come for me today because I know what I'm talking about. All right? Go and look it up. There's actual articles on this that they have recently come out with a couple years ago. But I noticed this as a student. All right? I noticed that the model for the SBI program or the business school was more so about gearing you into working for a Fortune 500 company, not necessarily building one from the ground up. And if you understand that those are two different kinds of business mindsets and business models, you would understand why I was like, that's nice, okay? But I don't want to be trained to just go work in someone else's corporation. I don't want to be trained just to go work for someone else's Fortune 500, making them all the millions of dollars, okay? And I'm still lacking the skills that I need in order to start my own business, okay? Now, I am not saying that people who left FAMU's SBI program didn't go on to start their own businesses, but I'm telling you that the model was really geared toward creating a black person who would be perfect for the Fortune 500 corporate America type of business. And that they would be able to be under someone else in that company and be able to execute whatever that business was. All right. So if you didn't want to own your own business, the SBI program was good. It worked for you. But if you were looking to have some more skills and have some more tools concerning starting your own business from the ground up, you know, I would tell my friends, you know, that I thought that FSU had a better business school program if that was what you were looking for. All right. And then some articles that came out recently about the woman who started the SBI program, and it come to find out that was actually her goal. All right. Her goal was to get black people into corporate America, to get black people into these Fortune 500 companies. So in terms of that, did she meet her goal? Yes, she did. All right. And that goal is still going on today. And so what she did was she formed partnerships with the Fortune 500 companies that as she graduated people out of that program, that they would almost be guaranteed a job or guaranteed opportunity, all right, to work at some of these Fortune 500 companies. So a lot of times when I'm reading business magazines, I like to read business magazines like Forbes, Savoy. Okay, if you read those business magazines, you will see a lot of them talk about the positions that black Americans hold. And if you go through those magazines, oftentimes it's the position of VP, it's the position of senior VP, it's the position of, what's the other one I see all the time? VP of diversity. Okay? Right now, I think the only president that we had of a Fortune 500 company is no longer that president. And she was a black female. She was the president of Xerox. I think she became the first black CEO of a Fortune 500. And I think at this point, she is not that anymore. So what am I saying? I want to see us in more than just VP positions. That's what I'm saying. I want to see us in more than senior vice president positions. I want to see us in more than vice president of diversity positions. Okay? So we don't want to just lead a life where we become a placeholder in someone else's bigger picture. Am I making any sense? I don't believe that God has called all of us to just be placeholders. I don't believe that God has just called all of us to be working necessarily under someone. But I believe that 2017 has shown us the necessity of creating your own, the necessity of founding your own. And again, it's not saying that we didn't do this in the past. We know that we did it in the past because of places like Greenwood in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we know that the potential is already there. The question is, are we going to get back to it? And are we going to move up from that 0.5% of wealth that Black Americans hold in this country? He says this: when the opportunity has been present, the Black bourgeoisie has often exploited the Negro masses as ruthlessly as have whites. As the intellectual leaders in the Negro community, they have never dared think beyond a narrow, opportunistic philosophy that provided a rationalization for their own advantages. Although the Black bourgeoisie exercise considerable influence on the values of Negroes, they do not occupy a dignified position in the Negro community. The masses regard the Black bourgeoisie as simply those who have been lucky in getting money, which enables them to engage in conspicuous consumption. When this class pretends to represent the best manners or morals of the Black, the masses regard such claims as hypocrisy. The single factor that has dominated the mental outlook of the Black bourgeoisie has been its obsession for the struggle for status. The struggle for status has expressed itself mainly in the emphasis upon social life or society. The concern of the Negro for social life and society has been partly responsible for the failure of educated Blacks to make important contributions within the fields of science or art. Educated Blacks have been constantly subjected to the pressures of the Black bourgeoisie to conform to its values. Because of this pressure, some gifted Blacks have abandoned altogether their artistic and scientific aspirations, while others have chosen to play the role of phony intellectuals and cater to the ignorance and vanities of the Black bourgeoisie in order to secure social acceptance. Since middle-class Blacks have never been permitted to play a serious role in American life, social life has offered an area of competition in which the serious affairs of life are not involved. Middle-class Blacks who have real contributions in science and art have had to escape from the influence of the social life of the Black bourgeoisie. In fact, the spirit of play or lack of serious effort has permeated every aspect of the life of the Negro community. It has therefore tended to encourage immaturity and childishness on the part of middle-class Negroes, whose lives are generally devoted to these trivialities. What is E. Franklin saying again? He's saying there's the Black bourgeoisie, there's the Blacks that get educated, and then there is the Negro masses, or what he calls the majority of Black people who are in a struggle, who are trying to elevate and get out of that struggle. And he says there is a combatance between Black people who are simply educated and want to be helpful, they want to be resourceful in society, and the Black bourgeoisie who are more concerned about materialism. There's always been a battle between the two. All right. The emphasis upon social life or society is one of the main props of the world of make-believe into which the Black bourgeoisie has sought an escape from its inferiority and frustrations with American society. This world of make-believe, to be sure, is a reflection of the values of American society as a whole, but it lacks the economic basis that would give it roots in the world of reality. In escaping into a world of make-believers, these bourgeoisie have rejected both identification with the Black and his traditional culture. Through delusions of wealth and power, they have sought identification with white America, which continues to reject them. It's 2018. Think on that. But these delusions leave them frustrated because they are unable to escape from the emptiness and futility of their existence. Gertrude Stein would have been nearer the truth if she had said of Black bourgeoisie what she said of Black people in general, that they were not suffering from persecution, they were suffering from nothingness. Not because, as she explained, The African has a very ancient but a very narrow culture. The black bourgeoisie suffers from nothingness because when Negroes attain this kind of middle class status, their lives generally lose both content and significance. So what is he talking about? He's talking about this element of society that causes black people to go off into materialism, and they stop focusing on what matters to their community. They stop focusing on building their community. They stop focusing on helping and elevating those who are still in the struggle. That is who he's talking about in his book. Again, we are reading from Great Documents in Black History, and that was a segment out of the actual book, Black Bourgeoisie by E. Franklin Frazier. His was the first work that actually turned the mirror to the black bourgeoisie and made them look at themselves in the mirror and say, what is it about what we're doing that needs to change? All right. Little bit of Black History flashcards, and then we're moving on to our piece on immigration. All right. Haile Selassie. Anybody know him? Let's see. If you're Ethiopian, you probably know him. And if you're Jamaican, you certainly know him. I was actually reading up on two of his descendants last week, King Melanik I and King Melanik II. This family bloodline is actually a result of Solomon, King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba's relationship. And they were, and they still are, probably the closest royal bloodline to King Solomon and King David that is still in existence. As a matter of fact, up here in the DMV, I think Haile Selassie's grandson recently got married to a young lady here in the DC area, and they got married at a Coptic Ethiopian church. All right, so his bloodline is actually still going. Haile Selassie was Ethiopia's regent from 1916 to 1930. He was emperor from 1930 to 1974. He served as chairperson of the Organization of African Unity. He's a former member of the Solomonic dynasty, or the family. He was forced into exile after Italy invaded Ethiopia, in case you all didn't know. He became the face of the resistance and went before the League of Nations in Geneva for assistance. He secured the help of the British in reclaiming his country and reinstituting his powers as emperor in 1941. Internationalist views led to Ethiopia becoming a charter member of the United Nations. The Rastafarian movement perceives Haile Selassie as a messianic figure who will lead a future golden age of eternal peace, righteousness, and prosperity. Now, one thing you need to know about Haile Selassie is Haile Selassie never saw himself as anybody's savior. All right? But, as with all people in human behavior, when Haile Selassie died, people started venerating him. They started worshiping him. Then they turned him into a messiah, and he became the head of the Rastafarian religion. All right? So, that's what happened. Haile Selassie never declared himself God, never wanted to be called God. As a matter of fact, he said, don't worship me. And what did we go and do? What did people go and do? When he died, they turned him into a god. Such is the nature of humans. All right. Some more Black history. The Haitian Revolution. All right. Why are people so mad at Haiti? There's a new documentary out called, I think, 1804, produced by Tariq Nasheed. And that documentary gives you the history of the Haitian Revolution. a little bit about it here. The Haitian Revolution is the most successful anti-slavery and anti-colonial insurrection overthrowing the French. They revolted and they became the first free black nation in the Western Hemisphere. That's why they are hated, because white supremacy hates to not be able to control other people. All right. So this led to, because they won, all right, and had they not won, if it wasn't for Haiti winning their revolution, France would not have sold in the Louisiana Purchase. France would not have sold part of the United States that we have today, which actually doubled the size of the United States. So really, we should be clapping that Haiti won, because it forced France to sell us property to double the size of our own country. All right. So because of this revolt, because of what happened in Haiti, it led to the West pulling out of the institution of slavery throughout the Americas. Because what happened was the leaders at the time of Haiti said, if black people escape from anywhere in the world, if they escape slavery and make it to Haiti, they were guaranteed protections by Haiti. Did that anger a whole lot of people? Of course it did. This was the only slave uprising that led to the founding of a state free from slavery and ruled by non-white people and former captives. Self-liberated slaves destroyed slavery. They fought to preserve their freedom, and with the collaboration of mulattoes, founded the sovereign state of Haiti. All right? So people are upset at this nation, and it's almost like a blacklisting, okay, where people don't want to help Haiti because they were self-liberated slaves. Isn't that a mess? You're angry because I freed myself. And so as long as I won't come under the bondage or under the oppression of a Western power, all right, you withhold help from us. And even with the earthquake in Haiti and all those billions of dollars that were raised, nobody knows what happened to that money. All right. People love Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, but the people of Haiti will tell you that they came over there and they began to exploit the resources of Haiti. So the Clintons messed over Haiti. All right. People don't want to talk about those kinds of things. The last thing you have on here is that they challenge long-held beliefs about black inferiority and the enslaved person's capacity to achieve and maintain freedom. They have achieved and maintained freedom, and the world has punished them for it. Because if you're going to be free and you're going to stay free, we're going to offer you very little aid and very little help, because we're still upset that you had the nerve to liberate yourself from oppression. That's a whole other sermon. People hate when you get free without their help. All right. Another Black History moment. And then I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to have the chance to get to my other two because I want to make sure we touch on immigration today. Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance. It was led from a period of the 1920s all the way through to the mid-1930s. Okay. The Harlem Renaissance was a cultural, social, and artistic explosion. It was called the New Negro Movement. It grew out of the changes that had taken place in the African American community since the abolition of slavery. It was a period of time when African Americans were encouraged to celebrate their heritage, their racial pride, their creative expression, and their intellectualism. All right? Yes, that is Mr. Armstrong on the front. Significant figures included Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Claude McKay, which I actually just shared a quote of his on my Instagram today. Duke Ellington, Claude McKay, Zora Neale Hurston, Bessie Smith, Paul Robeson, and Langston Hughes were some of the musicians, the authors, writers, poets of the time. All right. So that's a little bit of our moment in Black history. I believe that we are coming to another time of renaissance in the arts and music as well. All right. So we have started talking about the German, Irish, and the nativists. All right. And immigration. And we last talked about how when these people immigrated over, that they were being given or allotted huge amounts of land. But you have to ask the question, where did they get this land from? Where was it coming from? Yes, Satchmo. Where was this land coming from? Well, obviously it was coming from the land that had been confiscated by our government. And they confiscated this land from the indigenous people, but then they were promising this land to those who were coming over from other countries. And so one of the things that we read last time was the fact that a man was able to purchase 67 acres of land for $1,160. And that was in the 1850s. So you know that today he wouldn't have been able to purchase land for $1,160, not 67 acres. But if they held on to that land is still in their family, still generating wealth and value. So when people talk about, I don't understand the wealth gap, or I don't understand why it seems as if the wealth gap is so large, a part of that wealth gap being very large is the acquisition of land, which was not afforded to Black Americans. All right. And a lot of that has to do with, let me see if I can draw you a picture. All right. So initially, I'm going to see if I can make it as simple as possible. Can you all see my green person? He's supposed to be green. All right. Initially, wealth was in people. Slaves were the stock and bond. Okay. The moment you say slaves are free, that money doesn't just go away. All right. Because they were traded on the stock market. So there was money already invested in slaves. But if I say that slaves are free, then where does I have to now put that value somewhere else? All right. Slaves were insured during this time. So that was a lot of your insurance companies are founded on slavery. They should be offering all Black Americans free insurance. That's the way I feel about that. All right. They were founded on insuring stock, which was people, which was slaves. All right. So if you take the value off of people, where are you going to now put this value? Because really up until this point, all right, land didn't need value because the value was in the people. So now I've got to take this value and I've got to transfer it. Got to transfer that value to a plot of land. So when people say, well, where did the value go? They started putting the value on land rather than people because we've got to have a place to transfer our value. All right. So if you've ever been wondering why it's really hard for Blacks in this country to acquire land, that's part of the reason why. All right. And we know God is not making any more land, at least not on this side of eternity. So it is important to acquire land if you want to have if you want to generate generational wealth. Okay. So think about it. If you purchased land in 1850 If you purchased land 67 acres in 1850 for $1,160, what do you think your land value is now? Okay, if your family has held on to that land. And up here in the DMV, especially over in Virginia, people have 500, 600 acres of land. One family owns it. Okay, so again, that becomes all right, that becomes stored wealth for my generations. All right, and this is why economists are saying that it's almost impossible to catch up with this kind of wealth because of the way that it was set up and established. That's why there's a 220-year wealth gap, which means that it will take 220 years for Black America to catch up to the wealth value of white America right now. Think on that. All right. So let's keep reading. It says, by the 1850s, the American Party for the Native American Party, as they first called themselves, not indigenous, they're talking about nativists. They were successfully winning state elections. Opponents called them the Know Nothing Party because they wanted to keep the workings of their organization secret. All right. So remember, we started talking about this American Party known as the Know Nothings, and they were anti-immigration. They were against immigration altogether. Laboring Americans believed that immigrants took jobs away because they were poor and desperate to survive. They would work for very low wages and employers would hire them instead of native-born workers. We're still having the same argument today. Many did start out working for low wages, but with time, they worked their way out of poverty and into better positions. Only those who don't want to work don't like it here, since in America, you have to work if you want to amount to something, wrote Anna Maria Schano to her family in Germany in the mid-1850s. She lived in New York City. You probably never thought I would be a washerwoman, but in America, you needn't be ashamed if you work. A person can have a hard time here at the start, but when someone's been here longer, then he can do well. This is true of the immigrants coming in. Remember, some of them came in saying, hey, I'm ready to work. I want to do well. I want to do better for my family. But you also have to understand that this is still in the 1850s, and what has not happened yet? Anybody know? Let's see. I'm going to give you a moment. What has not happened yet? Because she's talking about working hard. And if you just work hard, you can have a better life. But what has not happened yet? If it's the 1850s, what has not happened yet is the Civil War. Which means, who is actually doing most of the labor for this country? Anybody? Anybody? Ferris, Bueller. The person who's actually doing the labor, especially in the South, is still the slaves. So she's having this conversation, but she's in New York City. All right? And by the way, they did have slaves in the North. They just were not picking cotton. Okay? So she's talking about this work ethic, but what people fail to realize is there's a whole group of people, about 4 million of them at the time, who are working, they're laboring, and they're not getting paid because they're not even seen as human. They're seen as property. During the American Civil War, 1861 to 65, American jobs and immigration were not important issues. Americans focused on whether the United States would remain one nation. So they stopped having the conversation. Once the Civil War began, they stopped really focusing on the conversation about immigration, because now they had to turn to, is this nation even going to stay together? In fact, immigrants from many countries fought for either the Union Army or the Confederate Army. But anti-immigrant feelings thrived again after the war, when several economic depressions made it harder to find jobs. Again, nativists focused on Catholic immigrants. So even during this time, there was not just ethno prejudice, okay, between the Irish and the Germans, etc., but there was also religious prejudice going on. They start targeting the Catholic immigrants. To be a member of the Nativist American Protective Association, founded in 1887, one had to take an oath never to vote for a Catholic. Hello? You mean to tell me in order to join your organization, I have to take an oath to never vote for someone because of their religious affiliation? Let me sip my lemonade. Listen to this one. Never to vote for a Catholic. Never to give a Catholic a job when a Protestant was available. And never to go on strike with Catholic people. You got to wonder about the founding of some of these unions and what are the oaths and what are the covenants behind joining. Okay? At the same time, Catholic immigrants and their children were becoming successful Americans. The Irish were gaining political power in New York and Boston. In 1885, Hugh O'Brien became Boston's first Irish-born mayor. He had come to the United States in 1832 when he was 5. He became a publisher and a city legislator. He came before the potato famine in Ireland, but immigrants escaping the famine did much to elect him. He served for 4 terms. So, I find it very interesting that when Black Americans are encouraging Black Americans, it never fails to have somebody come on a social media page and say, that's racist. You all are helping each other. You all are encouraging each other to run for office. You all are willing to just vote for each other. That seems to be the history of how things have worked in this country. Okay? Those who were immigrants saw another immigrant that came from their particular background, their particular county over in Ireland, and they voted him in. And he served 4 terms. Patrick Collins was Boston's second Irish-born mayor. When he was 4, his father died. His mother could not support the family in Ireland. The alternative America extended a hope that there would be opportunities for herself and her children, said a 1901 article published in the New York Times. When Collins was 12, he became the office boy of a lawyer, and it was in this office that his dreams first began to take definite shape. He later apprenticed in an upholstery shop and became foreman and then secretary of the union. He served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1883 to 1889. When not at his office, the Times wrote, he can be found at his home, deep in his books, which have been his teachers since he was obliged to leave school. Collins took office as mayor of Boston in 1902. Collins had been a respectable leader in his trade union. Americans in general, however, worried about the rise of labor unions and of strikes, which were sometimes violent. Nativists believed that most labor leaders, people who organized the workers to demand better treatment and pay, were foreigners. They considered them agitators, people who stirred up trouble. Some immigrant labor and political leaders were anarchists, men and women who were against any organized government of laws. This frightened many Americans who believed that if there were no government and laws, there would be chaos. Some of the anarchists were German. Nativists began to blame German labor agitators for what they call the Haymarket riots. And we will talk about that next week. All right, as we finish up with the Germans, the Irish, and the nativists. So let me give you 3 words, because my husband and I are watching a series right now about the quote-unquote men who made America great. Ironically, Donald Trump is in this documentary giving his 2 cents. But while all this was going on, you must understand, all right, while black people in this country, and thank you all for giving me a little bit of leeway. I'm probably going to be about 5 minutes over, all right, as we close. While black people were coming out of being labeled subhuman, inhuman, 3/5 of a person, all right, they were released with 0. Okay, probably the clothes on their backs and maybe some food in a bag, and they were set loose on society. You're free to go, but we give you nothing. You're free to go, but all you have is the clothes on your back, all right? At the same time that this is happening, same era, white people, coined white, are coming over, and they have 3 things that makes them ahead of the curve of a newly freed people who have been here since the 1600s. All right, I want you to think about that. 1619, 1620 was supposedly the first time that black people were being brought over. It is now the 1860s to 1880s. All right, after the war, more immigrants are coming over. Some are fighting in the war. Okay, so you're talking about people who are coming over with very little understanding of the people who have been in the country since the 1600s. And here's 3 things that they're coming over with that is not being afforded to the people who have been recently released from slavery. All right, education, opportunity, and access. You can write those down. Education, opportunity, access. Yes, the immigrant populations were fighting amongst themselves. They were fighting amongst themselves about having a prejudice between each other. Germans against Irish, Catholics against Protestants. But even in all of that, they still were getting educated. They were being given opportunity, and they were being given access. All right. So when you talk about upward mobility in a society, you need all 3 things. Right now, people are pretty okay with seeing black people who want to be educated or seeing black people who want to go to college. But what happens when they get out of college? Where is the opportunity? Where is the access? All right. So we can't just be concerned about getting educated and getting a degree. We need to make sure that those who are educated, those who are degreed, those who go to trade school, those who get the certification, also get opportunity and also get access. All right. The last couple of years saw several people with degrees homeless. Why? Opportunity, access. All right. So the perception about the homeless had to change because the data was showing that there were a lot of educated people with degrees who were homeless because they weren't being given opportunity and access. Okay. I met a lot of them in my region. All right. So thank you again. This has been another Daring Dialogues. I have been your host, Shantae Charles. I want to thank you again for your time and attention. I hope that I have shared something today that will be helpful to you in understanding the issues that we face today. understanding the history behind the black bourgeoisie. All right. Understanding some of the issues that we're facing and talking about today concerning immigration. Understanding the language that is being used, and understanding that it is a dog whistle back to a time when people of color in this country were very limited. All right. So I want to thank you again. Thank you all for those of you who have been sharing the broadcast. I hope that you will join me tomorrow. Tomorrow, we know, is a love day that everybody celebrates, but I hope that everybody is celebrating love all day, every day, 24/7, 365, and that you're not waiting to show how much you love and care someone one time a year. I'm going to pray for you if you are. All right. So tomorrow we'll be talking about relationships, and I'm going to get into a interesting topic. We're going to talk a little bit about hoe culture. I know I wanted to do something else, but that's not what the Lord is leading me to talk about. So join us for a very interesting conversation. I will be reading from a book, Dr. Apostle Janet L. Clary, and her book is about her life, and it's called Judge Nothing Before the Time. And she talks a little bit about her personal story, but we're going to talk about hoe culture. And prayerfully, we're going to make sure that none of us are involved in hoe culture. All right. So singles, you definitely want to tune in. I don't think you want to miss tomorrow's broadcast. All right. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out today and be light. Do good, seek justice, and don't forget, help the oppressed. All right. Take care. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. God bless and have a great day. And I want to thank you all for your time and attention as well. Hopefully you'll be able to join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have any questions for me, please email me at reachshantae@gmail.com. Again, that's reachshantae, SHANTAE @gmail.com. Take care and God bless.